from that learning process, have you discovered systems that you've created for yourself to help you work through a book or work through a story that has made it easier over time? Or is it just as much a struggle today as it was when you were first doing Storm Whale?
Um, it's different in that often what I do now is I write the text first.
Yeah.
Um, and that kind of started sort of on, I think that was on Tad, that sort of started like that. Or maybe a little bit on Grandad's Island, actually, I suppose. Um, because I started to find that, like, when I did the pictures first and then I wanted to apply the words afterwards,
Yeah.
that it was like I've got the pictures, I've already told the story, relatively told the story, sort of like visually, and now I
Yeah.
need to add the words. Like, what are the words? What are they? Because I've done it with the pictures. What are the words? I don't know how to do. So it's like, what do you pick, like, out of all the things you could say about this thing? Because you could take it in so many directions, right? It could be
Yeah.
anything. You could write, within reason, you could write anything.
Mm.
You might even write something that was like the opposite of what you were looking at. It could be like totally, you know, trying to sort of, upend what you're. I know some people work in that way, so it's kind of could be, but it could be anything. So. Um, so that's but writing it first, I find, is like I then sort of, whilst I'm not separating the two jobs completely, but like the first job is the writing and then the second job is the illustrating, like in
Mm.
that way. But obviously visually, like I've come up with it in my head, but like I sort of found it's not so much easier, but like there's more of I can sort of put my head into a more of like a sort of storytelling mode
Right.
for the text. I can
Right.
sort of tell the story as I see it in my head,
Mm.
or I've committed sort of the drawings, if you like. And there might
Yeah.
be some key moments that I want to get in there, but it's kind of, I found it kind of better to just sort of do that and get that sort of text sort of working in a kind of, um, with a certain sort of like voice and rhythm and pace to it. Um, I can sort of feel like I can unfold a story
Right.
better doing that than if I drew it first. I
And
think it's like that's one of the like that's one of the big challenges, really.
mm.
A bit like when I've spoken to students about doing that, and how they always want to know, how do you do that? How do you write? Like, do you know what I mean? It's like this sort of
Yeah.
like, what's this formula in between these two things, words and pictures, and how it all operates. And I honestly have no scientific way of doing it. I just sort of do
Yeah.
it. It's just like, I just think it's almost like you just got to like find this. And I think that's the thing that's happened a few times. Like Tad was like that. The snowflake was like that. Um, like these sort of, even the Stormo was a bit like that. That
Mm.
this first line or part of this story comes in to your mind, and you just sort of have to crystallize something about, like, and that's the only way I can describe it. That
Yeah.
doesn't sound solid enough to me, but it's almost like, so the storm whale, it was, Noy lives with his dad and six cats by the sea, and it's like that was like the moment when I sort of so I'd drawn these beach huts,
Right.
this image that I was saying years, before it was going to be a book, and it was just based on the idea of the film that I'd done before, but I'd seen these beach huts, and these beach huts weren't like in the film that I'd made. It was just like a little hut thing, but it wasn't the same. So it's like there's these beach huts, and there's this, and then I was like, oh, I'm going to put those two characters who then had evolved in my head to be the characters, sort of pretty much as you see them now. But so the
Yeah.
dad's there, and then and the cats weren't in the film. I didn't have time to animate cats. Nobody wants to animate cats, six cats. But when I drew that image, the dad went in, and Noi went in, and then the cats are like sort of, and I was like, oh yeah, cats. And I was like, Noi lived with his dad and six cats by the sea. So
Yeah.
like that then was like, that felt like the beginning of something, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
And then it sort of came out of that. and the same with as I've described with Tad, how it kind of came
Mm.
out that sentence. And yeah, so that's what I kind of find is like I will just like I'll have an idea brewing, and it might be that I've done a drawing, especially if it's a
Mm.
new thing. So Noi is a bit different because obviously I've drawn him a lot of times now, and I know it. I wouldn't necessarily need to draw him to then think of a new story. But if I
Yeah.
start thinking of new context for a story, then suddenly I might start going in another direction with it, and then something will come from that. But if it's a new thing, yeah, I might have. It might be something that was in a sketchbook that then becomes, yeah, like a kind of moment where I'll just be
Mm.
like, I know I've just been brewing on it for a while, and then suddenly, like, I'm making it all sound very mystical and magical, and it really isn't. Just like, but it is that sort of thing. But then I suppose it is a little bit. It's a little bit like you just suddenly something triggers, like I don't know, you look at something or you've done something, and then it's kind of like you go, ah, yeah, that could be the
Mm.
sentence, a sentence. That's like
Yeah,
feels
yeah,
like that feels like it's like a little thread, and it's like suddenly it's like pulled, and then you get pulled into it, and it can just unravel. So again,
yeah.
thinking of Tad, that so I'd got that sentence that I'd written to go with this image of the tadpole, but then it's like after I don't know, maybe it had been like a couple of weeks, and then
Yeah.
suddenly I'm like, I I start making a note of this on my phone, and I wrote like a very raw version, first draft of it, but like in like a few hours or something,
Yeah.
and then that was it. It was like sort of you know a thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. Even though you say you don't have a system, you sort of do in the sense that it
Mm.
starts with a potential character or a drawing or an idea that is percolating in the back of your mind, and
Yeah,
then it seems that the system you've set up is the first thing is finding that first sentence that is an invitation to the story or a summary of what the story could be in one line. I think that's a good way to look at things
mm.
is because it breaks down the process and you're not like writing a whole paragraph. You're like, I'll start with one sentence and then
Yeah,
see where that sentence then pulls me along
yeah,
depending on the character. And
yeah,
then it seems like you sit on that for a while, right?
yeah.
Uh, do you like from all the books that you've written? Have you ever just written them all in one shot, or is it always this sort of like percolating process that's happening in the background where you might get the character, you might get a line, and then a couple of weeks later, suddenly all that information is sort of like downloaded, and you're like, oh
Mm.
right, this all the connection starts happening, and you start writing it down.
Yeah, I think it's in the background. It's all in the background, and then it's
Yeah.
like there'll just be like a moment, and it could be like the point that I come up with the
Mm.
sentence, which is the one that triggers the whole thing, or it
Yeah.
might be a bit later on. But it's
Yeah.
like, and then when it sort of happens, it's sort of I do. It feels like, I mean, I've got ideas like that where I have written them down, and they're ones that I've never then made it into a book because then I don't know, something else has sort of kind of got in the way of them, or they don't feel quite right.